So the Greens are demanding rent controls. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Well, it looks like the Greens are using the power that they have. They're not going to let the government push through certain policies unless they get what they want. This is why, when people say, why are you complaining about the Greens? Why are you complaining about them? They've never been in charge. They have significant influence. Labour depends on preferences from the Greens to actually get into government. And now, since the entire mainland is controlled by Labour at both levels, well, people are going to have to get the full experience. And they won't be able to blame the coalition anymore for all the shit things that are going wrong. At least I'm sure they'll find a way to do it. So let's check out this article. But before we go through it, I need to remind people why rent control is a bad thing. Look up Ireland. Look up the Irish example of their interventions in the market, because it's failed miserably and it caused more problems than it would hope to address. Now, the problem is these sound good. To the average punter, it's great. They want the government to do something about it. It's unfair. These greedy landlords putting rents up so high, and they're taking action. So for the average voter, I can see how they love this. I can see how the average punter who doesn't really understand what they're voting for or the actual implications of this government intervention would be happy for it. But this is why we need to get the message out there so the average person learns about the danger of the government intervening in a market like this and just the mess that it causes every time. This isn't revolutionary new theories. This is proven failure, okay? There's evidence of this falling apart again and again and again and again. But, hey, I guess that's the problem with democracy. It's not about what's right. It's about what's popular. So, here we have a free... Oops, nope. Wait, I want to draw on it. We've got a free rent market here. Okay, this is a... I want to draw on it. Why can't I draw on it? Come on. There we go. We've got a free rent market here. Okay, we've got a supply and a demand curve. So here's the short-run supply of rented houses and the demand. And it reaches an equilibrium. Okay, now in Queensland, because the demand for houses is getting even higher and higher and higher, that means at the moment the curve is shifting over to here. So that means the equilibrium point is up here. So rents have shot up. They've skyrocketed. That's why people are getting charged $100, $200 more a week, because the demand has increased. Now, I would argue there's ample evidence that that demand has been, well, spurred by government interventions in our freedoms to travel and leave our house during lockdowns, and why a whole lot of people left Victoria, and a lot of them came to Queensland. So we're getting an influx of demand. So that's putting an increase on prices. And the government's thinking, oh, that's bad. We have to restrict that. In Queensland, they've brought in a very pathetic form of some control. They're limiting your rent increases from twice a year to one a year. So you know what that's going to mean. Rather than getting a $100 increase, you're going to get a $200 increase or a $250, because they want to pad it just to make sure. So one of the dangers is, what if they look at introducing a rent ceiling? We don't want the government to intervene in this market, because this is a signal. If rents are high, that's a signal to build more properties. That means fantastic. Rather than investing my money in shares or in starting up a business, I need to, I'll put it into building a house so I can rent it to someone, because I'll get a decent return. It's worth doing. That's what this is. The high rent prices in Queensland are a signal for people to build more houses. Now, rather than getting out of the way and making it easier for people to build houses, that's not what we do here in Australia. We ramp up immigration and make it harder. So that's what we have here. We've got a free market system. But what happens is, if you introduce a rent ceiling, you artificially limit the rent that people can do. You put a cap on it. Rent control, you'll see in America. And it doesn't work. For a few reasons. It creates excess demand. So there's more people. So demand has gone from Q1 to Q2, because at this lower price of P0, shall we say, more people will want to rent. There'll be people that would normally share house or would normally live at home. They can afford to rent at that level. So there's now more demand for property. But you think, okay, more demand, will people build more houses? Well, no, they won't. because their yield isn't the same. This is an artificial demand brought about. I'm still still recovering from the other day. An artificial demand brought about by government interventions in the market. So then you've got, what you have is, you've got reduced rents to landlords as well, but you're going to have a fall in supply. So some people will go, you know what? And we're already seeing that here. Just because of the Queensland government here announcing that they might do something, you're seeing some investors looking at other states now. It's the psychology of it all too. Landlords will go, to hell with this, I'm out. I'm out. Then you're thinking, fantastic, they'll sell to people. Yeah, sure. But then you won't have more people building and investing to build more stock. You'll have a shortage of rental houses. Supply will go down to reach that maximum rent here. So before, we had our supply was at this level. See, this is demand. So the supply drops down. People pull out of the market. People build less. Even if you have no people pulling out of the market, but less people investing, with our continued population growth, it's going to feel like rental properties are disappearing from the market. The other thing is it can create a shadow market, a black market, where people will illegally sublet and do those type of things. None of it is good. None of it is good, guys. So just keep that in mind when you hear people talking about we need to have rent caps, we need to have rent controls. We don't want that. What we want is easier for people to build. And I'm working on another slide deck about housing costs. And I would make the argument that houses aren't actually that expensive compared to the 80s. But there's a few things going on that the media doesn't like to talk about. So let's look at this. And thank you to everyone who asked. The whole family's doing a lot better. Can you imagine living in a one bathroom house with 7 people that all have gastro? It's eventful. So the Greens' rent demands not met threaten Anthony Albanese's pre-budget plan. So there you go. Albo is he owned by the Greens or controlled by them? He'll be influenced by them, that's for sure. The Greens won't wave through one of Anthony Albanese's key election promises unless the government agrees to freeze rents around the country for 2 years and spend more money building public housing. Freeze rents for 2 years. Why don't, before the Greens are proposing this, why don't, as a sign of good faith, all of the people who voted Greens freeze their rents for 2 years and then publicly sign a stat deck, list the property, and show that they're doing that, to show us what it's like? Why don't the Greens do that? There's going to be a lot of people that own property. There are a lot of inner-city champagne-sipping socialists that will 100% have properties that are investment. Well, why don't they do that? To show us, to be leaders here in Australia, to take that burden on for us. What do you reckon? You think that'll happen? The minor party and independent senators like David Pocock and Lydia Thorpe have lashed Labor for their unwillingness to budge on housing reform and rental assistance, meaning Labor's Housing Australia Future Fund is likely to pass through Parliament before the May budget. Is unlikely, sorry. Yeah, there we go. 30,000 houses. Wasn't it 1 million? Wasn't that the promise? Under the plan, 30,000, guys, it's bugger all. Okay, let's hang on. This is it's an old chart of building approvals, but if you have a look at it, you can see 30,000 is 2 months of building approvals. The last time I looked at this chart, you know, whoop-de-doo. Are we meant to be impressed by that? Okay, just think about it like that. Wow, 2 months of building approvals. Oh boy, Labor are going to make a difference. They're going to make no difference. They're going to make no difference. But I guess this is what people need to learn. This is why, I'd say this is why a lot of people vote for the coalition. Not because they're good, but because they're better than the alternative. And I guess you have to grow up a bit and experience what it's like. So, with an estimated 500 million, under the plan, the government would invest 10 billion into the future fund, with an estimated 500 billion of annual returns to be spent on building 30,000 social and affordable houses in the first 5 years. 5 years to just build 30,000 houses. This is pathetic. This is utterly pathetic. This is going to do absolutely nothing. You've got $10 billion sitting there How are you going to invest it? Is it going to be anything like the other funds that the government invests money in that barely make anything? See, this is why I would argue the government needs to step out of the away from this and incentivize private people to build these type of houses. They need to. The problem is the scale and complexity of our constructions now to what it was 30, 40 years ago. You know, a starter home now is very different to one in the 80s, and that adds to the cost. This would include 4,000 properties for women and children facing family and domestic violence and older women at risk of homelessness. Yeah, what about men? You know, we still don't have a men's shelter in Australia where, as a father, if you are suffering from domestic violence, you can go with your children. Your children will be taken away from you. They'll be put somewhere else. There's no facility in the country for that. The minor party and Senators Pocock and Thorpe are strongly critical of the package in its current form, saying $500 million a year would not build enough homes. Yeah, well, I agree with them. The Greens also want the government to agree to a national 2-year freeze on rents. So the government is going to do 30,000 shitbox homes in 5 years, okay, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. But this 2-year freeze on rents, that's going to have a greater impact on investment in new builds. So, looking at this, what do you think is going to happen to the supply of housing and rental properties? Do you think it's going to be cheaper and easier to rent? Or do you think it's going to get worse? I think we all know where it's going to get. This is why you don't vote for leftists into government, okay? This is the type of shit they propose. They don't think it out enough. All they care about is what the feels are good. They don't look at historical precedent. They don't look at other countries where it's failed again and again and again. And now, this is a joke. Because if you really want to get housing built, if you want to get housing more affordable, you need to increase supply. You need to get more people building. You need to make it easier to build. You need to step away and let the free hand of the market find a solution. But I guess it's Australia. We don't do that, do we? The Greens have accused the government of playing politics. Well, of course. Questioning how in the same austerity budget, Labor can justify spending $368 billion on a nuclear submarine, but not budget on a $500 million annual spend on key housing infrastructure. The Greens housing spokesman, Max Chandler Mather, said the housing plan would make the crisis worse, doesn't guarantee a single cent for housing, and does nothing for renters. You know what? Let me just check up on this guy. Is he the one I think he is? Hang on. Let me have a look here. Greens. Is he our one? I'm worried that we've got a Greens that wants to run as a city councillor here in Brisbane. That's concerning me. Who is he? Member for Griffith. Oh no. Is he the one? Yeah. Yeah, okay. The Apple worker. Perfect. Couldn't they have gotten a builder to be there? I guess not. They've got an architect. They've got an architect as a member of the Greens. Why isn't she the member for housing? I know her. I've met her husband. Anyway. Would make the crisis worse, doesn't guarantee a single cent for housing, and does nothing for renters. Well, he's right. It doesn't. It's going to make it worse. But so is the Greens' proposal as well. The government needs to take housing crisis seriously, he told a joint rally with the CFMEU outside Parliament House on Tuesday. The idea they can gamble $10 billion of public money on Peter Costello's future fund and say, oh, we will only spend the returns on housing, when last year it lost $120 million, is a sick joke. Yeah, this is the problem. The Futures Fund isn't doing too well. How dare the Prime Minister refuse to negotiate in good faith, as the Greens have proven we can do, to come to a table and fix a plan that currently would only make the housing crisis worse. The Greens say they want a national 2-year freeze on rent increases for real relief. At least $5 billion directly spent on building new social and affordable housing, and a separate $1 billion for First Nations housing. $1 billion. 25% of the equivalent of 25% of the money going to, or 20% going just to, a tiny fraction of the population. But the problem is a lot of the First Nations or Aboriginals live in remote parts of Australia, so housing construction is much more expensive. It's more reasonable than the government has just found $368 billion for the nuclear submarines. As for how Mr. Albanese can enforce a rent freeze, Mr. Chandler Mather said it could be possible either via National Cabinet or as a condition of the next National Housing and Homelessness Agreement. We just saw the federal government negotiate an energy price cap that required coordination with the states. Housing Minister Julie Collins said the federal government didn't have the constitutional levers to impose rent controls. Good. We don't want them to get those levers. These policies are not good. It's just going to make it all worse. I mean, it's the same old stuff here. I can't go through this anymore. It's just frustrating. I mean, there you go. They're in beds with the CFMEU. And weren't they? They were praising the Venezuelan government. Isn't that awesome? And look at how they turned out. So, guys, there we go. This is not going to get any easier. No matter what they do, it's not going to get any easier. They need to increase supply. They need to take a step back. I don't think they can, though. By doing that, Labour and the Greens will have to admit some of their policy decisions are incorrect. All of their interventions in the energy efficiency requirements for houses, that could all be pulled. Don't need that. I mean, look at a bog standard 2-bed, 1-bath, mission brown painted bricky from the 80s. Compare that to what you're building now. Look at the cost of all of the paperwork and reporting and things you need to get that isn't really adding anything to the house. It's just feel-good stuff. It's not going to make any difference at all globally. It's just concerning, guys. It's just, I don't think it's going to get any better. And renting's going to get tougher, everyone. Your best bet is to build up a passive income stream and not be dependent on anything from these people. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Check out Heise BIM and Heise Does. If you're a fan and enjoy the content I create here, you can support us on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links, buy our pocket squares, or call us if you need an architect. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.